Sarah Martinez had always been different from other kids in her small Texas town. While other girls her age were playing with dolls or learning to braid hair, Sarah was in her grandfather's backyard, learning to shoot a bow and arrow. Her grandfather, Roberto, was a quiet man who had served in the army decades earlier. He believed that discipline and focus were the most important things a person could learn. "Mija," he would say in his gentle voice, "a weapon is only as good as the person holding it, but the mind is the real weapon." Sarah's parents thought it was just a phase. Her mother, Elena, worried that her daughter was too focused on what she called boy activities. Her father, Miguel, worked long hours at the local auto shop and didn't have much time to worry about hobbies. But Roberto saw something special in Sarah. She had steady hands, sharp eyes, and most importantly, she never gave up. Every day after school, Sarah would rush to her grandfather's house. The old man had set up targets at different distances in his large backyard. He taught her everything: how to stand, how to breathe, how to focus her mind completely on the target. Sarah loved the quiet moments before releasing the arrow. Everything else in the world would disappear, and it was just her, the bow, and the target. "Why do you like this old weapon so much, abuelo?" Sarah asked one afternoon when she was 12 years old. Roberto smiled and adjusted her stance slightly. "Because, mija, this weapon teaches you patience. It teaches you to be calm when everything around you is chaos. Modern weapons, they are fast and loud. But the bow, it requires your whole being to work together." Sarah practiced for hours every day. Her friends at school thought she was weird. They would invite her to sleepovers and shopping trips, but Sarah usually declined. She preferred spending time with her grandfather, learning new techniques and pushing herself to be more accurate. "Sarah's obsessed with that stupid bow," her classmate Jennifer would whisper to others. "It's so weird. Who uses bows anymore?" But Sarah didn't care about their comments. She found peace in archery that she couldn't find anywhere else. Her grades were excellent because the focus she learned from archery helped her in school too. Her teachers praised her concentration and determination. When Sarah turned 16, she started thinking seriously about her future. College was expensive and her family didn't have much money. She had heard about military scholarships and decided to research different branches of service. That's when she first learned about the Navy SEALs. "Abuelo, do you think women can be as tough as men in combat?" she asked one evening while practicing. Roberto paused his whittling and looked at his granddaughter. "Mija, strength comes in many forms. Physical strength is important, but mental strength is more important. And you have both." Sarah began training harder. She added running and swimming to her daily routine. She convinced her high school to let her start an archery club, though only 3 other students joined. Most kids still thought archery was outdated and useless. "In a real fight, you'd be dead before you could even draw your bow," said Marcus, a football player who often bullied students he considered different. "Guns are what matter now. Your bow is just a toy." Sarah never responded to comments like this. She had learned from her grandfather that actions spoke louder than words, but inside, she was building a determination that would carry her through the most difficult challenges of her life. During her senior year, a military recruiter visited the school. Sarah approached him after his presentation and asked about opportunities for women in special operations. The recruiter, Sergeant Thompson, was honest with her. "The SEALs just started allowing women to try out," he said. "It's incredibly difficult. Most men don't make it through training. But if you're serious, you'll need to be in the best shape of your life, mentally and physically." Sarah nodded. She had already decided. After graduation, she would enlist in the Navy and try to become a SEAL. Her parents were shocked when she told them her plans. "Mija, why don't you go to college like a normal girl?" her mother pleaded. "Find a nice job, maybe meet a good man." "This is what I want, Mama," Sarah replied firmly. "Abuelo taught me that we have to follow our path even when others don't understand." Roberto supported her decision completely. In the months before she left for basic training, he intensified her archery practice. He also taught her about mental toughness and dealing with people who would doubt her abilities. "In the military, you will meet people who think women are weak," he warned her. "Some will try to break your spirit. But remember, You have been preparing for this your whole life. Trust in your training and trust in yourself." The day before Sarah left for Navy basic training, she and Roberto had one final practice session. She hit the center of every target from distances that amazed even her experienced grandfather. "You are ready, mija," he said proudly. "But remember, the bow will always be with you, even when you don't carry it. The lessons it taught you, focus, patience, precision, these will serve you no matter what weapon you use." Sarah hugged her grandfather tightly. She didn't know it then, but this would be one of the last conversations they would have. Roberto passed away quietly in his sleep during her second month of basic training. When Sarah received the news, she was devastated, but she remembered his words about mental strength, and she pushed through her grief. She finished basic training at the top of her class and was accepted into SEAL preparatory training. The real challenge was just beginning. SEAL training was known for breaking even the strongest candidates, and Sarah would soon discover that being a woman in this elite program brought challenges that no amount of archery practice could fully prepare her for. But she carried her grandfather's lessons with her every day. When instructors screamed at her, she remembered the quiet focus required to hit a target at 100 yards. When her body wanted to quit during impossible physical challenges, she thought about the discipline she had learned through years of daily practice. Her fellow trainees were mostly supportive, but some questioned whether she belonged there. They came from backgrounds with modern military weapons and high-tech equipment. When they learned that Sarah's primary training had been with a bow and arrow, some couldn't hide their amusement. "A bow," laughed Tom, a former Marine. "What's next? Throwing rocks. This isn't medieval times, Sarah." Sarah just smiled and continued her training. She knew that soon enough she would have a chance to show everyone what she had learned from her grandfather. The real test wouldn't be just about physical strength or even marksmanship with modern weapons. It would be about the qualities that archery had taught her since childhood, the ability to remain calm under pressure, to focus completely on the task at hand, and to trust in years of disciplined practice. These lessons would soon prove their worth in ways that none of her doubters could imagine. As she progressed through the grueling months of SEAL training, Sarah kept a small photo of her grandfather in her gear. In the photo, he was holding his old bow, the same one he had used to teach her everything she knew about precision, patience, and mental strength. She was going to need all of these qualities very soon. SEAL training was unlike anything Sarah had ever experienced. The instructors were relentless, pushing every candidate beyond what they thought was possible. Sarah quickly learned that physical fitness was only part of the challenge. The mental pressure was constant and overwhelming. Every morning began before dawn with brutal physical training. Sarah excelled at running and swimming, thanks to the conditioning she had built up over years. But the obstacle courses and team challenges required different skills. She had to learn to work closely with men who were often twice her size and had very different backgrounds. "Martinez, you're holding up the team," shouted Instructor Chief Petty Officer Williams during a boat carry exercise. "Your teammates are compensating for your size." Sarah gritted her teeth and pushed harder. She knew that some of the criticism was fair. She was smaller than most of her teammates. But she also suspected that she was being watched more carefully than the men. Every mistake she made seemed to be noticed and commented on. Her bunkmate, Jake Rodriguez, was one of the few who treated her just like any other trainee. Jake had grown up in a military family and had wanted to be a SEAL since childhood. "Don't let Williams get to you," Jake said quietly one evening as they cleaned their gear. "He's hard on everyone, but I think he expects you to quit. Prove him wrong." Sarah appreciated Jake's support, but she knew she had to earn respect through her actions, not her words. The problem was that many of the training exercises favored raw physical strength, and that wasn't her strongest advantage. Everything changed during weapons training. The instructors started with basic rifle marksmanship, something Sarah had never done extensively. Her grandfather had taught her to shoot rifles occasionally, but the bow had always been their focus. "Today, we're testing your precision under pressure," announced Instructor Williams. "You'll shoot from multiple positions while under time constraints. This simulates real combat conditions." Sarah watched as her fellow trainees took their turns. Most did well, but several struggled with the time pressure. When nervous or rushed, their shots scattered around the target instead of grouping tightly. When Sarah's turn came, she approached the firing line differently than the others. Instead of immediately focusing on the weapon, she took a deep breath and centered herself mentally. This was exactly what her grandfather had taught her to do before every arrow release. "Martinez, we don't have all day," called Instructor Williams. Sarah nodded and raised the rifle. In her mind, she applied everything she had learned about breathing, focus, and follow-through. The rifle was different from her bow, but the mental approach was identical. She fired her first shot, then smoothly transitioned to the next position. Her shots were consistently accurate, and she finished well within the time limit. But what impressed the instructors more was her calmness under pressure. While other trainees showed visible stress, Sarah appeared completely focused and relaxed. "Not bad, Martinez," said Williams afterward. "Where did you learn to shoot?" "My grandfather taught me, sir," Sarah replied. "Mostly with a bow and arrow." Williams raised an eyebrow. "A bow? That's an unusual background for a SEAL candidate." Some of the other trainees overheard this conversation. That evening, word spread through the training group about Sarah's archery background. The reactions were mixed. "A bow and arrow?" laughed Peterson, a former Army Ranger. "What did she do? Hunt deer for dinner? This isn't summer camp, Martinez." But Jake was curious rather than dismissive. "How is bow hunting similar to combat shooting?" he asked Sarah privately. Sarah explained how archery had taught her to control her breathing, maintain focus under pressure, and make every shot count. "With a bow, you usually only get one shot at your target," she said, "so you learn to make it perfect." "That actually makes sense," Jake replied. "Most people spray bullets and hope to hit something. You learn to make every shot deliberate." The next phase of training involved more complex scenarios. The trainees had to navigate through simulated combat situations while maintaining accuracy with their weapons. This was where Sarah's archery background began to show its true value. During one exercise, the trainees had to move through a course filled with pop-up targets while carrying heavy packs. They had to identify friend from foe quickly and engage only the enemy targets. Most trainees struggled with the decision-making under pressure and the need for precise shooting while moving. Sarah approached the course differently. Instead of rushing through and shooting rapidly, she moved deliberately and took careful aimed shots. Her accuracy was outstanding, and she successfully identified all targets correctly. "Martinez set the standard today," announced Instructor Williams to the group. "Perfect accuracy and perfect target identification. Study her approach." Some of the trainees were impressed, but others were resentful. Peterson approached Sarah after the exercise with several other men. "You got lucky today, Martinez," he said. "But when we get to the really challenging stuff, your bow and arrow experience won't help you. Real combat isn't about taking careful aim at stationary targets." Sarah remained calm, remembering her grandfather's advice about responding to doubters with actions rather than words. But inside, she was forming a quiet determination to prove that her training was not only valid, but superior in many ways. The opportunity came sooner than expected. The instructors announced a special challenge that would test multiple skills simultaneously. Teams of 4 would navigate through a complex course that included water obstacles, climbing challenges, and precision shooting stations. "This exercise will determine who advances to the next phase of training," Williams explained. "You'll be evaluated on teamwork, individual performance, and ability to maintain precision under extreme physical stress." Sarah was assigned to a team with Jake, Peterson, and another trainee named Collins. Peterson immediately tried to establish himself as the team leader. "Look, Martinez," he said during their planning session, "we need to play to our strengths. You handle any basic shooting requirements, and let us handle the heavy physical stuff." "Actually," Jake interjected, "maybe we should listen to what Sarah thinks about the shooting challenges. She's been the most accurate so far." Peterson scoffed. "Accuracy in training isn't the same as performance under real pressure. When things get chaotic, you need experience with real weapons, not toys." Sarah had heard enough. "Peterson, tomorrow you'll see what my toy training can do under real pressure." The night before the challenge, Sarah spent time alone, practicing the breathing and mental techniques her grandfather had taught her. She visualized the course and imagined herself staying calm and focused no matter what obstacles appeared. She thought about Roberto and how he had always believed in her. He had told her that the bow would teach her everything she needed to know about precision under pressure. Tomorrow, she would find out if he had been right. The morning of the challenge, the teams gathered at the starting line. The course was intimidating. It stretched for several miles and included water crossings, rope climbs, crawling sections, and multiple shooting stations with different weapons and target types. Remember, Williams told the assembled trainees, this isn't just about speed. Accuracy counts heavily. Missing targets will add significant time penalties. As Sarah stood with her team at the starting line, she felt the familiar calm that had always come to her before releasing an arrow. She was ready to show everyone what years of disciplined practice with her grandfather's outdated weapon had really taught her. Peterson looked confident, Collins appeared nervous, and Jake gave Sarah an encouraging nod. In a few minutes, Sarah would begin proving that sometimes the oldest lessons were the most valuable ones. The starting horn sounded, and Sarah's team began their race through the challenging course. Peterson immediately took the lead, setting a punishing pace through the first obstacle section. Sarah kept up easily, her years of conditioning serving her well. The first shooting station appeared after a grueling 2-mile run through sand and mud. The team had to engage targets at varying distances using standard rifles. Each team member had to hit at least 3 out of 5 targets to avoid time penalties. Peterson went first, breathing heavily from the run. His first 2 shots missed, and Sarah could see his frustration building. He managed to hit his last 3 targets, but barely. Collins was next, and struggled even more. The physical exertion had affected his shooting badly, and he only managed to hit 2 targets out of 5. This added precious minutes to their team time. Jake did better, hitting 4 out of 5 targets, which was respectable given the circumstances. Then it was Sarah's turn. As she approached the firing position, she noticed something the others had missed. The wind had picked up, and the targets were swaying slightly. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her memory. Always read the conditions, Mija. The environment affects every shot. Sarah took her position and immediately began her breathing routine. The physical exertion from the run had elevated her heart rate, but she used techniques Roberto had taught her to quickly regain control. She waited for her breathing to steady, then began engaging the targets. Her first shot hit center mass. The second target required adjustment for wind. She compensated instinctively the way she had learned to do when shooting arrows outdoors. Another center hit. By her 5th shot, she had achieved something none of the other trainees had managed. All 5 targets hit in the highest scoring zones. Outstanding shooting, Martinez called the range instructor. Perfect score. Peterson's face showed irritation, but there was no time to discuss it. The team continued through the course, facing increasingly difficult obstacles. They crawled under barbed wire, climbed rope walls, and navigated through a simulated building clearing exercise. The second shooting station was more challenging. It involved moving targets and required the shooters to engage while in awkward positions, prone, kneeling behind cover, and shooting around obstacles. This time, Peterson's performance was even worse. The stress was clearly affecting his accuracy. This is ridiculous, he muttered after missing his first 3 shots. These conditions are impossible. Sarah watched him carefully. She realized that Peterson's problem wasn't his shooting ability. It was his mental approach. He was fighting the pressure instead of working with it. Her grandfather had warned her about this. When you fight the pressure, it wins. When you accept it and use your training, you become stronger. When Sarah's turn came, she approached the station differently than the others. Instead of immediately focusing on the weapon, she spent a few seconds observing the pattern of the moving targets and the rhythm of their movement. This was exactly how she had learned to track moving game with her bow. She took her position and began engaging targets while moving between different shooting positions. Each shot was deliberate and controlled. She treated the moving targets the same way she had learned to track deer through the forest with Roberto, predicting movement rather than reacting to it. Again, she achieved a perfect score. More importantly, she had done it faster than any of the previous shooters because she wasn't wasting shots on misses. Jake was amazed. "How are you staying so calm?" he asked as they moved to the next obstacle. "Everyone else is struggling with the pressure." "My grandfather taught me that pressure is only a problem if you let it control you," Sarah replied. "The key is to trust your training and not overthink the situation. Peterson overheard this and snorted. Easy to say when you're shooting at predictable targets. Wait until we get to the real challenge. The real challenge Peterson referred to was the final shooting station, which had a reputation for breaking even experienced shooters. It involved multiple weapon systems, unknown distances, and targets that appeared only briefly. Teams had failed this station in previous training cycles, and several candidates had been dropped from the program because of poor performance here. As they approached the final station, Sarah could see the setup was indeed intimidating. There were rifle targets at various distances, some partially concealed. There were also closer targets that required pistol work, and some that demanded rapid transitions between weapon systems. The instruction was simple but daunting. Each team member will face 4 surprise target scenarios. You won't know what to expect until each scenario begins. You have 30 seconds per scenario. Miss more than one target in any scenario, and your team receives a significant time penalty. Peterson went first, and the pressure finally got to him completely. In his first scenario, he had to engage 3 targets at different distances quickly. He rushed his shots and missed 2 of them. In his second scenario, involving moving targets, he missed 3 out of 4. By his 4th scenario, Peterson was clearly rattled. His hands were shaking slightly, and he was second-guessing every decision. He managed only 1 hit out of 4 possible. Collins performed slightly better but still missed several targets. Jake did well in his first 3 scenarios but struggled in his 4th, which involved shooting while wearing a gas mask. Then it was Sarah's turn. As she stepped up to the line, she heard Peterson mutter to Collins, "Watch her fail when it really matters. All that bow and arrow nonsense won't help her now." Sarah centered herself the way Roberto had taught her. She thought about all the times she had successfully hit difficult targets with her bow, even when her grandfather had created challenging conditions. This was no different. It was just another test of focus and precision. The first scenario began. 3 targets at unknown distances, all appearing simultaneously. Sarah quickly assessed the distances, selected her priorities, and engaged them systematically. 3 hits, all in high-scoring zones. The second scenario involved moving targets that appeared and disappeared rapidly. Sarah tracked them smoothly, leading her targets the same way she had learned to lead flying birds with her bow, the 4 hits. The third scenario was the pistol work, close-range targets that required rapid engagement. Sarah's transition between rifle and pistol was smooth, and her shot placement was precise. 4 hits. The final scenario was the most challenging. Mixed distances, moving and stationary targets, and a time limit that forced rapid decision-making. As the targets appeared, Sarah fell into the zone she had discovered years ago with her grandfather, the place where time seemed to slow down and everything became crystal clear. She engaged the closest threats first, then systematically worked through the targets at increasing distances. Her movements were economical and her shots decisive. When the scenario ended, she had achieved something that had never been done before in this particular exercise: a perfect score across all 4 scenarios. The range instructor approached her with obvious amazement. "Martinez, in 5 years of running this exercise, no one has ever scored perfectly on all 4 scenarios. How did you stay so calm under that kind of pressure?" Sarah smiled, thinking of her grandfather. "Sir, my grandfather always told me that if you train your mind properly, pressure becomes your friend instead of your enemy." Peterson stood nearby, his face showing a mixture of shock and grudging respect. The comments about her toy weapon had stopped completely. Jake patted her on the back. "That was incredible, Sarah. I've never seen shooting like that under pressure." As the team prepared for the final sprint to the finish line, Sarah felt her grandfather's presence with her. The lessons he had taught her with his old bow had proven themselves in ways she had never imagined. But she knew the real test was still coming: actual combat, where everything she had learned would be put to the ultimate challenge. For now, though, she had shown everyone that sometimes the oldest training methods produced the most reliable results. The bow may have been ancient, but the principles it taught, focus, patience, and precision under pressure, were timeless. 2 years after completing SEAL training, Sarah found herself deployed to Afghanistan as part of an elite special operations team. She had proven herself repeatedly during advanced training, but combat would be the ultimate test of everything her grandfather had taught her. Her team consisted of 4 members: herself, Jake Rodriguez, who had become one of her closest friends, Tom Bradley, an experienced SEAL with multiple deployments, and Mike Dutch Vanderberg, a weapons specialist who had initially been skeptical of Sarah but had grown to respect her abilities. Their mission was to provide overwatch and precision fire support for a larger operation aimed at capturing a high-value target in a remote mountain village. Intelligence indicated that the target was heavily guarded and had access to escape routes through difficult terrain. The key to this mission, explained their team leader, Lieutenant Commander Hayes, is precision. We can't afford any stray rounds in a populated area, and we need to be able to stop vehicles or personnel from escaping through narrow mountain passes. Sarah's role was primary sniper, with Jake serving as her spotter. They would position themselves on a ridge overlooking the target area, providing cover for the assault team and preventing any escape attempts. As they prepared for the mission, Dutch approached Sarah with an unusual request. "Martinez, I've been thinking about what you said about your bow training. Would you consider bringing your bow as a backup weapon? I know it sounds crazy, but there might be situations where a silent weapon could be valuable." Sarah was surprised. Dutch had been one of the most skeptical team members about her archery background. "You really think it could be useful?" "In these mountains, sound travels far," Dutch explained. "There could be situations where we need to eliminate a threat without alerting others. A bow is completely silent." Sarah considered this carefully. She had brought her grandfather's bow with her to Afghanistan, more as a personal memento than a practical tool, but Dutch's reasoning made sense. "I'll bring it," she decided, "but only if the team leader approves." Lieutenant Commander Hayes was initially skeptical when Dutch proposed the idea, but after considering the mission requirements and Sarah's demonstrated accuracy, he agreed. "If Martinez thinks she can make it work, we'll try it. But remember, this is in addition to your normal loadout, not a replacement." The team inserted into their overwatch position before dawn. Sarah and Jake established their sniper position on a rocky outcropping that provided excellent visibility of the target area. Dutch and Tom set up a support position slightly behind them. As the sun rose, Sarah could see the village below. It was a typical mountain settlement, with narrow streets and traditional stone buildings. Intelligence photos had identified the target building, but there were civilians moving through the area. "This is going to require very precise shooting," Jake observed through his spotting scope. "Any miss could hit innocent people." Sarah nodded, adjusting her rifle and checking the wind conditions. This was exactly the kind of situation her grandfather's training had prepared her for. High stakes, no room for error, and the need for perfect first-shot accuracy. At 0800 hours, the assault team began their approach. Sarah's team had been in position for over 3 hours, and she had used the time to study every detail of the target area. She knew the range to every possible shooting position and had calculated holds for different wind conditions. The operation began smoothly. The assault team moved into position without being detected, and Sarah maintained overwatch on potential escape routes. Then everything changed in an instant. The assault team was compromised when a guard spotted them. Gunfire erupted throughout the village, and Sarah could see enemy fighters moving to positions that would allow them to escape through the mountain passes. "Contact! Multiple enemy personnel moving to the north exit," Jake called out, identifying targets through his scope. Sarah acquired her first target, an enemy fighter carrying a rocket-propelled grenade launcher who was moving toward a position where he could engage the assault team. The range was 350 meters, and there was a crosswind that would affect bullet trajectory. She applied her breathing technique, felt for the natural pause in her heartbeat, and fired. The shot was perfect, eliminating the immediate threat to the assault team. "Target down," Jake confirmed. "Next target, 2 o'clock, approximately 400 meters. Sarah smoothly transitioned to the next threat. Her training with moving targets paid off as she successfully engaged an enemy fighter who was running between buildings. Another perfect shot. The engagement continued for several minutes, with Sarah providing precise fire support that allowed the assault team to complete their mission. Her shooting was flawless. Every shot found its target, and there were no civilian casualties. But then, Jake spotted something that made his blood run cold. "Sarah, we've got a problem." 3 enemy fighters have taken position behind that stone wall at 200 meters. They have a clear shot at our assault team's exit route, but there are children playing right next to them. Sarah looked through her scope and saw the situation immediately. The enemy fighters were using the presence of children as cover, knowing that American forces wouldn't risk civilian casualties. But if they weren't stopped, they would ambush the assault team as it withdrew. "I can't take the shot with the rifle," Sarah said. "The children are too close. Even a perfect hit might cause ricochets or fragments." Jake was quiet for a moment, then said, "What about your bow?" Sarah looked at the distance and the tactical situation. It was a difficult shot, 200 meters, with the need for absolute precision to avoid hitting the children. But an arrow would have no explosion, no fragments, and no noise to alert other enemy fighters. "Cover me," Sarah said, setting down her rifle and reaching for her grandfather's bow. Dutch, who had been monitoring their communications, spoke up. "Martinez, are you sure about this? That's a long shot under pressure." "Trust me," Sarah replied, "nocking an arrow. This is what I've been training for my whole life." She drew the bowstring, feeling the familiar tension that connected her to thousands of hours of practice with Roberto. The wind was steady, the target was clear, and she had complete confidence in her equipment and abilities. Sarah focused on her breathing, entering the zone of perfect concentration that her grandfather had taught her. Everything else disappeared. The sounds of gunfire in the distance, the radio chatter, even her own heartbeat. There was only the bow, the arrow, and the target. She released the arrow flew in a perfect arc, covering the 200 meters in just over 2 seconds. It struck the primary target with lethal precision, dropping him instantly without any sound that would alert his companions. "Perfect shot," Jake whispered, amazed. The other two don't even know what happened. Sarah was already nocking her second arrow. The remaining enemy fighters were still focused on the assault team's position, unaware that their companion had been eliminated. Sarah's second shot was equally precise, neutralizing the second threat. The third enemy fighter finally realized something was wrong and started to move. But Sarah's third arrow was already in flight, striking him before he could escape or threaten the children. "All threats eliminated," Jake reported. The children never even knew they were in danger. The assault team successfully withdrew with their captured target, and Sarah's team exfiltrated without further incident. As they made their way back to base, Dutch shook his head in amazement. "Martinez, I owe you an apology," he said. "I thought your bow was just an old-fashioned hobby, but what you did today saved lives, both our guys and those kids." Jake nodded in agreement. "That was the most incredible shooting I've ever seen, under pressure. How did you stay so calm?" Sarah thought about her grandfather and the countless hours they had spent together in his backyard. "My grandfather always told me that pressure reveals who you really are inside. If you've trained properly, pressure becomes your friend." Tom, the most experienced member of the team, had been quiet during the discussion. Finally, he spoke up. "In 15 years of special operations, I've never seen anything like what you did today. 3 perfect shots at 200 meters with a bow, under combat conditions, with civilian lives at stake. That's beyond impressive. That's legendary." When they returned to base, word of Sarah's achievement spread quickly through the special operations community. The story of the SEAL who had used a bow and arrow to save an assault team became part of unit folklore. Sarah called home that evening, wishing she could tell her grandfather about what had happened. Though Roberto was gone, she felt his presence with her every day. His lessons about focus, precision, and mental toughness had not only made her a better SEAL, but had literally saved lives in combat. As she sat cleaning her grandfather's bow in her quarters, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From a young girl practicing in a backyard in Texas to a combat-proven SEAL in Afghanistan. The path had been filled with doubters and challenges, but Roberto's faith in her abilities had never wavered. He had seen something special in his granddaughter and had spent years patiently teaching her the skills that would serve her throughout her life. The bow may have been an ancient weapon, but the principles it taught were timeless and universal. The next morning, Sarah's commanding officer called her into his office. "Martinez, I'm recommending you for commendation based on yesterday's action," he said. "But more importantly, I want you to know that your performance has changed how we think about individual skills and non-standard equipment. Thank you, sir. My grandfather would be proud. He should be. You've proven that sometimes the oldest lessons are the most valuable ones. Keep that bow handy, Martinez. Something tells me you'll have opportunities to use those skills again. Sarah smiled, thinking of Roberto's words. The mind is the real weapon. Her grandfather had been right about everything. The bow had taught her far more than marksmanship. It had taught her who she really was and what she was capable of achieving. In a world of high-tech weapons and advanced equipment, a simple bow and arrow had reminded everyone that skill, training, and mental toughness would always be the most important tools in any warrior's arsenal.